This obsession that everybody has with eating protein-rich, fat-rich foods. Good God, how long are we going to operate under this lie? Everybody is obsessed still, and I cannot for the life of me understand why. This myth has been debunked a long time ago. And you've got these ostensible professionals in the field writing books, putting out documentaries, extolling the benefits of loading yourself with ultra-concentrated fat and ultra-concentrated protein, catering to your addictions. And it's being given a pass. I don't know how they've gotten away with it. I was recently watching this documentary about how you too can cater to your adulterated food addictions and feel perfectly fine about it. And it's just, it's just so frustrating. Okay, let's just run some various clips here.
What you end up with are correlations between health and disease, and one of the correlations is that people who consume a lot of artificial sweeteners tend to be more obese and diabetic than people who don't.
Artificial sweeteners have been a staple for dieters.
Oh my gosh.
And there's a real debate about the harm they cause.
The problem is, if you think about
no, there isn't. Okay, look, no, there isn't. There's no debate here. All right. See, these people that jump on these documentaries and they start to compare carbohydrate-rich diets with fat and protein-rich diets, what they do is they just target the worst and the worst of processed carbohydrates, lump that all into a plant-based diet, a vegan diet, and say, oh, well, this diet obviously doesn't work because artificial sweeteners and artificial refined carbohydrate products are clearly bad for you. Okay, nobody in the actual healthy side of the plant-based community, okay, nobody in the actual raw food, healthy lifestyle variety of the vegan world, of the plant-based, whole food plant-based world, nobody on that side is arguing or extolling the benefits of artificial sweeteners and ultra-processed carbohydrate foods. Everybody is in collective agreement that these things are not good for you. But when you watch these documentaries, ladies and gentlemen, they are going to tell you that carbohydrates are bad because they have lumped in all of the worst of highly processed, refined carbohydrate products into the collective group of plant-based diets. It's so unbelievably juvenile and stupid that I mean, it's hard to believe that these documentaries are getting away with this. It's ridiculous. So yeah, when people are sick and they use highly processed carbohydrates and artificial and refined sweeteners, no crap. And nobody is arguing that those things are healthy for you. They are erecting a straw man and they are destroying the straw man. That's what's happening. Oh, okay. Here's a good one. This is Nina Teicholz. She's the author of a popular book extolling the benefits of eating dead bodies, right? So here's what she has to say.
People who eat a lot of red meat. Who are those people? Those are the people who have ignored their doctor's orders for the last 35 years. That means they do a lot of other unhealthy things. They probably drink too much. They don't go to cultural events. They don't follow their doctor's orders. They don't take their medicine. They don't have happy family lives. Maybe they live next to...
I'll stop right there. This is kind of unrelated, but I'm just showing you this little clip because it shows where this person is at in their thinking and in their research into what constitutes health and wellness and vitality. If I'm not mistaken, I think what she just said is that an unhealthy lifestyle habit is not following your caregiver's recommendation for poison pills, right? And so if you abstain from taking poison compounds, then that is an unhealthy decision to make. If you took a meal-sized portion of any of those things that you find in that pharmacy, you can swiftly end your life. Try to do the same thing with apples or bananas. It's not happening, okay? So if this educator is convinced that taking poison treatments is something that is healthy, I would really start to question what else she considers healthy. All right. Now, that's a bit of a logical fallacy. She might be completely right about the other things, right? So understand that. That is a bit of a logical fallacy. But in this case, when this person is purporting to have an outstanding bit of knowledge about health and wellness, you would imagine that the most obvious glaring offenses to health she would be aware of, and obviously she's not. Oh, okay, this one's good. Okay, check this one out.
A vegan approach, a vegetarian approach, is consistent with standard dietary guidelines. And the question is that really a healthy approach?
A vegan approach, a vegetarian approach is consistent with standard dietary guidelines. Huh? Okay, let's check that out. Okay, so over here we've got the dietary guidelines for Americans from for 2020 to 2025. All right, the DGA, and right on the bloody front cover, okay, we've got meat products. I'm not exactly sure what type of carcass flesh this is, but right there on the front cover. Okay, now obviously, dead bodies are not part of the vegan diet. So let's just read what the DGA has to say about, I just want to see what their standards are. You know, the general message about what a good diet is, okay? And we're going to see if the vegan diet is consistent with these guidelines, as this person says in the documentary. Here we go. The core elements that make up a healthy dietary pattern include, here we go, vegetables of all types, dark green, red, and orange, beans, peas, and lentils, starchy and other vegetables, fruits, especially whole fruit, grains, at least half of which are whole grain, dairy, dairy, including fat-free or low-fat milk, yogurt, and cheese, and or lactose-free versions of fortified soy beverages and yogurt as alternatives. Dairy. Is dairy a vegan product? Absolutely not. Protein foods. Oh my God, protein foods. It's not. What does protein mean? Protein is in every goddamn food. It's in everything. This is so funny. Vegetable is a food. Fruit is a food. Grains are a food. Dairy is even a food. Protein is an element. Protein is a nutrient. It's not a food. But here they have protein as a food. They don't even know what they're talking about. Like, it's just, and people repeat this. I talk to people all the time and they'll tell me, you know, they'll just regurgitate. It's like, I eat fruits and grains, you know, sometimes I have some coffee. I have some protein in the mornings. What? You have protein in the morning? What the hell does that mean? You know what it is? When people say protein, what they are doing is they are using a euphemism to get around saying the word meat or cow or pig or horse or dog or whatever it is. It's a way to mentally divorce yourself from the guilt associated with eating a dead body. All right. That's what is happening. That it is a euphemism. It's like me taking someone's life and saying, oh, I just neutralized their consciousness, right? No, I killed a person, right? That's what this is. Anyhow, protein foods, lean meats, poultry and eggs, seafood, beans, peas, lentils, nuts, and seeds. So is any of that consistent with a vegan or vegetarian diet? Absolutely not. No. So is a vegan diet consistent with standard dietary guidelines? No, it's not. I have no idea where this person got that information from. Let's try again. Let's try a different set of dietary guidelines. Okay, let's try my home country, Canada's dietary guidelines for health professionals and policymakers. Right on the bloody front cover of this PDF. First damn page is a plate full of food, and some of that food, again, is the muscle tissue of tortured creatures. Okay, I'm gonna assume that they don't recommend a vegan diet since they've got animal products right on the front cover. But that could just be an assumption, so let's actually read what they have to say. Section 1, Foundation for Healthy Eating. This is guideline number 1. Okay, nutritious foods are the foundation of healthy eating. I would definitely agree with that. Vegetables, fruit, whole grains, and protein foods should be consumed regularly. Among protein foods, consume plant-based more often. Okay. Protein foods include legumes, nuts, seeds, tofu, fortified soy beverage. None of those things I agree with. Fish. What? Shellfish. Eggs, poultry, lean meats, including wild game, lower fat milk, okay, let's just stop right there. Is any of that consistent with a vegan diet or even a vegetarian diet? Absolutely not. These are clearly meat products. So when this person in this documentary is saying that a vegan diet is consistent with standard dietary guidelines. It's just a straight, bold-faced lie. It's unbelievable.
Meat has always, throughout all of history and every culture, been associated with virility. It's the food of warriors.
It's been associated with virility. That's interesting. A diet high in fat and protein, excess protein way beyond what your body needs, is associated with erectile dysfunction. Because when you cripple those tiny, tiny little capillaries that feed your sex organs, and you clog them with fat, right? You stifle off their blood flow, what happens is you get erectile dysfunction.
When I think of a manly man, I think of somebody who has strength, endurance, sexual prowess, and fertility. And in fact, what the scientific studies are showing is that the more meat men eat, the more quickly they lose their manly manhood.
So whether meat eating has been associated with virility or not, that's irrelevant, because we know the opposite is true. You can associate it with virility if you want, because meat eating and taking down big animals, it makes us feel good. It makes us feel strong. It makes us feel like the alpha predator. Right? Mentally, you make the association to virility. But again, if erectile dysfunction generally occurs later on in life with a diet rich in these things, then
food of people who make war. You know, it gives men and women muscle mass. It makes them strong.
That's true. That's true. You eat a lot of meat protein and you exercise, you will be providing your muscles with extra stimulation. Highly concentrated protein is very stimulating to the body. And yeah, it can gain you muscle mass, or at least the appearance of big muscle mass on the outside. What they don't tell you is that comes at the expense of health and vitality.
For instance, in the Maasai warriors who were studied rigorously by the University of Vanderbilt scientists in the 1970s, they found that the warrior class, but not the women, the warriors consumed only meat. Meat, milk, and blood was their entire diet.
Their health is not good. They might have great teeth, but their health is not good. And I don't need to add anything else to this. Mike the Vegan has taken care of this very thoroughly for me. So thank you, Mike. You can check out his video if you want further details on this.
She presents the Maasai as a pinnacle of health, comparing them to this victim of carbs, Fat Louisa.
Who's on the USDA recommended low-fat, high-grain diet here? This guy over here is a Maasai warrior. Fat Louisa was a Pima Indian in the 1930s and 40s, and she's obese.
Presenting things like this is a testament to just how little evidence there is to support her claim. Here's some other victims of carbs. Here are the Tarahumara people who ate 80% of their calories from carbs, have unmatched physical abilities, and we actually have data on their diet. Then there's the Okinawans, the longest living culture in the world, with 85% of their diet from carbs and loads of data on their population. This is the study that Nina is referring to as George Mann's study of 600 Maasai. Again, Nina presents them as awesomely healthy, but George Mann's thesis is kind of like, why aren't they all dropping dead of heart attacks? Because when speaking generally about the Maasai, quote, measurements of the aorta showed extensive atherosclerosis or artery disease, which equaled that of old US men.
Wow.
Of course, Nina fails to mention this and starts outright lying instead.
And they weren't particularly active.
She pulled this out of thin air, directly from the study. Quote, these pastoral people are exceptionally active. And from another study on the Maasai by the International Livestock Center of Africa, they found that these people are precisely 175% as active as Americans. Finally, conclusions of the Maasai health from Mann's studies are often criticized because in Mann's first study on the Maasai that looked at 400 people, for example, only 3 of them were over 55. And as you can see by this American Heart Association chart, heart attacks and fatal heart disease massively increases after the age of 55. Anyway, enough of the Maasai. They are clearly not a population worth emulating, and definitely not a reason to eat more animal fat.
Anytime you talk to a meat eater, they'll say, well, look at the Maasai. They eat meat, and they're skinny, and they don't have heart disease. Well, they live to an average age of 45. Now, they're not dying of heart disease and cancer. They're dying of, infectious disease, or they're dying of a lion. But they did autopsy studies on them. And guess what? They do have heart disease. And you got to remember, they're living at altitude. They're not eating nearly as many calories as are. They're walking a hell of a lot more than we are, but they still do have heart disease. And then the crazy thing is when they tell you Inuits. Well, the Inuits eat a lot of fat and they're healthy. No, they're not. They're not healthy at all. They die at an average age of 50. They have heart disease. They have cancer, and they have all these different things.
You're a human being. You are not a carnivore. You are not an omnivore. You have to get over this outrageous addiction that is destroying your life. Okay? And not only destroying your life, but it's also unnecessarily destroying the lives of all of the animals that we subjugate. Here's a quick clip of Nina Teicholz at a debate on whether vegetarians are healthier than omnivores. And this clip is kind of funny.
So that's the government's systematic review. Here's another systematic review of clinical trials in heart disease. They could only find that only 836 people had been tested, which is not very many. And they found that although those trials lowered your LDL, which is your bad cholesterol supposedly, it also lowered your good cholesterol, your HDL. That came down in a vegan vegetarian diet. That's a sign of your heart disease risk increasing. And those diets also almost always increase your triglycerides, which are the fatty acids in your blood. Why? Because it's not the fat you eat that becomes the fat in your blood, but the carbohydrates you eat. And vegetarian diets are almost always higher in carbohydrates.
Oh my God. The level of ignorance here is astonishing. Carbohydrates, period. That no quantifying, no context, nothing. Just carbohydrates make you fat. That's what she said. That's what she wants you to believe. It's so irresponsible. Carbohydrate rich food, in the absence of other concentrated fat, I'm going to say this, it would be almost impossible to get fat. Yes, carbohydrate can turn into fat in your body. However, because it's such a sought after and preferred fuel source, it's the prime fuel source that your body is looking for, carbohydrate food. You would have to eat wildly in excess of whatever your body's caloric general threshold for the day would be. Don't ask me to tell you exactly what that is. This varies for people. But we're talking in the ballpark of you'd have to eat for you to start noticeably and significantly translating and converting carbohydrate food into fat, you would have to start eating 4,000, 5,000 calories, 6,000 calories in the day, right? To see a significant proportion of carbohydrates being converted into fat. Why is that? Because it actually requires energy investment for your body to change carbohydrates into fat. Your body would much rather just burn the carbohydrates for fuel. So what happens is if you start eating more carbohydrate-rich food, then your body will just increase its metabolic rate and you'll start to burn more carbohydrate. But you won't store it as fat. But what you will store as fat is fat, because fat is the preferred storage form of energy in your body.
Our body says, all right, let's look at carbohydrates and let's look at fat and let's see what we should do with these guys. All right, so fat enters our body, excess calories in the form of fat. And our body says, all right, what am I going to do here? It only costs 3% of the calories to store that fat as fat. And our body says, ooh, that sounds pretty cheap, but let me make sure that I weigh my other options. So your body then looks at carbohydrates and it says, okay, we got carbohydrates here. How much is it going to cost to store those carbohydrates as fat? As it turns out, it costs 30% of the calories from carbohydrates to store those as fat. So your body says, no way, Jose, I'm not going to store carbohydrates as fat. 30%, our body is not going to store those carbohydrates as fat because it is just so much money metabolically. It burns so many calories to do that our body does not want to do that. Our body wants to conserve as much energy as possible. The process of turning carbohydrates into fat is known as de novo lipogenesis. If we eat too many carbohydrates, Then what happens? Well, as we discussed, when we eat too many calories, the excess fat gets stored directly as fat because it is just so cheap to do so. So when we eat excess calories, it's not the carbs that get stored as fat, it's the fat that gets stored as fat. So only under extreme circumstances does de novo lipogenesis occur. There was a study done in which women were fed in excess 50% of their calories every day and an extra 135 grams of pure table sugar on top of that. These women were being fed 3,000 calories, which is 1,000 extra calories, and 135 grams of pure table sugar on top of that. One would think, oh my goodness, that pure table sugar, straight into the fat cells. What they found from this study is that it would have taken 4 months for the women to gain 1 pound of fat from that excess carbohydrate intake. They were only storing 4 grams a day of fat from the excess carbs. So excess carbohydrates are not readily stored as fat. It turns out that the excess fat that we're eating is what's getting stored as fat.
See, what she means, but has irresponsibly omitted from the statement, is that refined carbohydrates, especially refined because when you refine carbohydrates, generally in refined carbohydrate products, you are adding salt and fat and other processed sugars, right? And you're eating this chemical soup, and that can indeed make you fat. And that's what she's thinking of in her head, but she's not, she's just said carbohydrates, period. People like this are touting to be professionals in the field and giving people this kind of advice. It's lies. It's so frustrating. I dare you to eat carbohydrate-rich whole foods only in the absence of other concentrated fats. I dare you to get fat on that. Just try to eat steamed broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, sweet potato, squash, apples, pear. Try to eat as many of those things in a day and see how fat you get. It's not going to happen. You're going to get so full so fast that you will not be able to physically fit more food in your body. The only way you will get fat is if you include oils and processed foods and other fats into the diet with those high carbohydrate foods.
Everybody knows this. I was a vegetarian for over 20 years. I avoided meat, red meat, butter, cheese, everything like the plague. And when you're not having meat for dinner or you can't have an egg pie, you're having pasta.
Egg pie? What the hell's an egg pie?
Having meat for dinner or you can't have an egg pie, you're having pasta, grain-based meals, you're having cereals, I used to bake my own bread. You have a high carbohydrate diet and that drives up your triglycerides.
No. Maybe when you went vegetarian, right? And maybe when you tried to exclude meats from your diet, you found recourse to processed foods, cereals, grains, highly processed grains, bread and wheat products. You make your own bread. Yeah, no, those things are not necessary for you to eat a plant-rich diet or a plant-based diet. That's what you did because you didn't have the knowledge and you didn't have the awareness and you maybe didn't have the discipline to be able to stick to an actual whole food plant-based diet. So do not generalize your failings on the diet to everybody else in the health community that is succeeding on a whole food plant-based diet, either raw or cooked. And if it is true that people are tempted to eat those ridiculous adulterated foods that she just listed, if that's true, that is not a result of a natural process of human sensitivity to food. That is the result of literally the world destroying and infiltrating our minds, infiltrating our bodies with these unnatural food products and making us addicted to things that are not food to begin with. So it's not natural that we go after those things. It's only so normal and so likely because the world has destroyed our food sensitivities because of highly processed, highly refined foods. That's enough out of me, guys. be healthy, be well. Don't listen to the world. Don't follow convention, okay? You need to start thinking for yourself and take your health and wellness into your own hands. Be a human being, reconnect with your natural human senses, and your health and vitality will take off to levels that you didn't know were possible. I love you very much, guys. See you on the next one.
We can see a physical effect on erections as a result of what they just ate for dinner.
But really, at the end of the night, the guy eating the big steak is soft, and the other guy is hard.
So, when you take your date out on Valentine's Day, where are you going to take them to eat?
To the veggie grills.
Okay, the veggie. Now, this is not a scientifically validated study, but the results that we're seeing are very exciting. I think this is going to wake a lot of people up. I think it's going to wake up people who have penises, and I think it's going to wake up people who like people who have penises.